Okay. Time to start actually reading the book of Micah. Let's scoot that back just a bit. There we go. Here's my cheat sheet. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to need this. The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth during the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. That's actually very annoying. I wonder where he came from, this stupid fly. A fly flying around here. Kind of weird, he just suddenly appeared about 2 minutes ago. I hadn't seen him before that. The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth during the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Now, Jotham and Ahaz had a co-regency together in the 730s BC, so these may all be the same time frame here. And Hezekiah, kings of Judah, the vision he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. So Samaria still existed at the beginning of Micah's ministry. However long Micah ministered for is unclear. But he started, when Micah started ministering, when he got his call to be a prophet, which we don't read about his call. Some of the prophets give us information about their call to be a prophet. Micah is not one of those. We do not hear about Micah's call. But whenever he got it, whenever he received his call to be a prophet, and he got his first vision from God, Samaria was still existing. The vision he saw concerning Samaria would fall in 722 BC. So the beginning of Micah's ministry at least started before that. The vision he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Those are the capital cities of the north and south. Samaria was the capital of the north, and Jerusalem was the capital of the south. Hear, O peoples, all of you. Listen, O earth, and all who are in it. This is his opening statement. Most of the prophets give an opening statement after they record their information about who they are and where they came from. And Micah is no different. He has his opening statement here. Hear, O peoples, all of you. Listen, O earth, and all who are in it. That the sovereign Lord may witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. Look, the Lord is coming from his dwelling place. He has a witness. He's got charges to bring against the people. He is coming from his dwelling place. That's heaven, by the way. He comes down and treads the high places of the earth. The mountains melt beneath him, and the valleys split apart, like wax before the fire, like water rushing down a slope. All this is because of Jacob's transgression, because of the sins of the house of Israel. What is Jacob's transgression? Is it not Samaria? What is Judah's high place? Is it not Jerusalem? So the capital cities of the respective kingdoms are being identified as the centers of their sin and idolatry. Therefore, I will make Samaria a heap of rubble. It's going to be destroyed. A place for planting vineyards. It's not going to be a city paved with streets and buildings. It's going to be a field again. Samaria was built on a hill. We read back when Omri, the king of Israel who established Samaria as the capital, he actually bought this hill from somebody who had been there before. We read about that in 1 Kings chapter 16. 1 Kings 16, verse 24. Omri bought the hill of Samaria from Shimmer for 2 talents of silver, and built a city on the hill, calling it Samaria after Shimmer, the name of the former owner of the hill. So the guy who originally owned the hill got the city named after him that was built there. So Samaria was built on a hill. I will make Samaria a heap of rubble, so it's going to go back to being a field, or whatever it was before. A place for planting vineyards. I will pour her stones into the valley, so the stones that build the city are going to be knocked down and thrown to the valley below at the foot of the hill, and lay bare her foundations. All her idols will be broken to pieces. We read about that in Amos and Hosea. All her temple gifts will be burned with fire. I will destroy all her images. Since she gathered her gifts in the wages of prostitutes, and we read a lot about that in Hosea, now didn't we? The wages of prostitutes, as the wages of prostitutes, they will again be used. I'm not sure what that means is literal or figurative. It could be either or both. It could be that they literally paid prostitutes wages. You know, they had these shrine prostitutes. They would go to these high places where these shrines were, and there were people there, women and maybe some men too, they could have sex with. And they paid them and they had sex, and that was part of their worship act, an act of fertility. So it could be that literally that money that they paid these shrine prostitutes is going to be used to pay more when they get to Assyria, or it could just be figurative, saying that the money that they spent on this stuff is going to go away and be used again. You know, they're not going to keep it. It's going to go away to the Assyrians or whatever. But anyway, that's it for Samaria. Okay, we've had 2 books so far of the prophets, Amos and Hosea, that were focused on the northern kingdom and the capital, Samaria. Amos apparently didn't go to the capital. He was in Bethel. Hosea apparently lived there in Samaria, for a while at least. But we have a good chunk of the book of Kings is devoted to the northern kingdom. You know, Elijah ministered there in the 800s BC. Elisha, his successor, ministered there for like 50 years, throughout the reign of the house of Jehu until the end of the 800s. Then Jonah came from there. Now the book of Jonah is not about his ministry to the northern kingdom of Israel. It's about his ministry to Nineveh. But he's from the northern kingdom. You read about him in 2 Kings 14, that he was from the northern kingdom. So God has sent prophets to the northern kingdom. You know, they have not been without a word from God. But this is it. That's the last we're going to hear of the northern kingdom. That's the last prophetic word spoken to the north. And it's basically just saying there's going to be a heap of rubble, and they're going to be gone. So that is God speaking. Here, I mentioned earlier about the change of speakers in this book. Okay, so we start off by having a narration saying the word of the Lord came to Moses, to Micah, and then he speaks. Okay, and he says, "Look, the Lord is coming." All right. Then in verse 6, God starts speaking. "I will make Samaria a heap of rubble." Okay, and he spoke the last couple of verses. And now here in verse 8, Micah is speaking again. So he just gave the word from God, and now he's giving his own personal response. Micah is speaking again now in verse 8. Because of this, because of the destruction of Samaria, I, Micah, will weep and wail. I will go about barefoot and naked. Those are signs of mourning and shame. Captives were often led away naked. We read about this in 2 Chronicles in the days when Israel attacked Judah and took away a lot of its captives, a lot of the women and children captive. And then when they sent them back, they were persuaded ultimately by a prophet who confronted them and told them to send those captives back, and they did. And they clothed them, the ones that were naked, because captives are often taken away naked. You look at reliefs and monuments from the ancient world at this time, and they loved documenting their Assyrians, Egyptians, they all did. They loved documenting their conquest of other nations. And so when they would have these reliefs drawn or sculpted on these monuments about conquering the nations, and they had the captives depicted, they would be naked most of the time and bound. So being naked and barefoot is a sign of shame and mourning. And he may have literally gone naked and barefoot. Isaiah is going to. We'll read in Isaiah that he spent 3 years walking around naked and barefoot. Hosea was called to physically model God's relationship with the people to his wife and children. Isaiah will physically be called to go naked and barefoot for 3 years. Ezekiel is going to have to lie on his side and eat dung. Okay, some of these prophets literally displayed visible symbols to the people that God wanted to communicate. So it's entirely possible that Micah literally did go around naked and barefoot. I don't know. I mean, he doesn't say that. This is kind of a poetic section here, but he may very well have done that literally. Anyway, so because of the ruin of Samaria, I, Micah, will weep and wail. Now, Samaria was a northern kingdom. He is from Judah, but they were all fellow Israelites, so he is mourning the loss of Samaria. I will weep and wail. I will go about barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal and moan like an owl. For her wound is incurable. That's Samaria's wound, is incurable. And it has come to Judah. So the same sin that led Samaria into destruction is here in Judah too. So we're not just mourning for the loss of Samaria, we're mourning what's happening in Judah as well. It has reached the very gate of my people, even to Jerusalem itself. Okay, so this next section, these next several verses are tricky. All right, I'm going to read through them, and then I'm going to read through them again. And he is basically giving an itinerary of things. He's going to be listing a number of different towns in Judah and talking about the different kinds of responses that they're going to have to this. There's a couple things going on here. He may be previewing the Assyrian campaign, because Assyria is a nation that's going to destroy Samaria. And Assyria is eventually, not immediately thereafter, but a few years later, Assyria is going to come into Judah and attack Judah as well. So he may be giving like a preview of the campaign route the Assyrians are going to be taking as they go through town after town in Judah. The Assyrians do not end up capturing Jerusalem, the capital, but they do capture a good chunk, or if not most, of the rest of the country. So what he's mentioning here in these next few verses may be a preview of the Assyrian campaign through Judah. But he's also focusing on wordplay with the names of these towns and their different responses to what's going to happen. And again, in English, this means nothing. So we're going to have to look at these footnotes to understand what these town names mean and the sort of wordplay that he is using. Hebrew has a sense of humor. We don't really read that in our English Bibles. The sense of humor that exists in the Hebrew Bible does not really come out at all in the English, because a lot of it is based on puns and wordplay. A lot of the humor that exists in the Bible just does not translate into other languages because it's very language based. So there's two things going on here, probably. He's mentioning these towns and playing off their names as a Hebrew wordplay for their kinds of responses. And he's probably doing this in preview of what's going to happen as the Assyrians eventually come into Judah after having already destroyed Israel. The first thing he's going to say, though, is a reference to David, King David. He says, "Tell it not in Gath, weep not at all." Now, that is a reference to 2 Samuel, when David was told about the demise of King Saul and his son Jonathan, that they fell in battle at the hands of the Philistines, and he mourns for this. This is 2 Samuel, very beginning of 2 Samuel 1, and he's starting let's start verse 19, and he is lamenting the defeat of the Israelites at the hands of the Philistines, and the deaths of Saul and Jonathan in battle. And he is saying, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice." Gath and Ashkelon were two of the capital cities of the Philistines. So he's saying, like, don't proclaim this news to the Philistine cities. Otherwise, they're going to be celebrating. You know, the women of his day used to celebrate him and say David has slain his tens of thousands. Now, David was used to going around and receiving the songs of praise from the women of Israel. And he's saying here, don't spread this news in Gath and Ashkelon, lest the women of the Philistines sing songs of praise to their leaders for having killed Saul and Jonathan. So Micah starts off his lament here by saying, don't tell it in Gath. Don't tell this news in the enemy cities of what's going to happen in Jerusalem. Now, Philistia itself is going to be attacked by Syria. They're not going to escape unscathed. But Micah is clearly referencing David's well-known lament over the fall of Israel in his own day. So he's saying, tell it not in Gath, weep not at all. And here's where we start with the names. In Beth Orphra, roll in the dust. And Beth Orphra means house of dust. Pass on in nakedness and shame, you who live in Shaphir. And Shaphir means pleasant. I'm not sure if the tie-in there is. Those who live in Zanan will not come out. Zanan sounds like the Hebrew for come out. Beth Ezel is in mourning. Its protection is taken from you. I don't have a footnote here with Beth Ezel, but my card here says house of taking away. So Beth Ezel is in mourning. Its protection is taken from you. Beth Ezel means house of taking away. Those who live in Maroth writhe in pain. And Maroth sounds like the Hebrew for bitter, waiting for relief because disaster has come from the Lord, even to the gate of Jerusalem. You who live in Lachish, Lachish sounds like the Hebrew for team, harness the team to the chariot. You were the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion. We'll talk about this daughter of Zion term later. It means Jerusalem. It means the personification of the city of Jerusalem. For the transgressions of Israel were found in you. Therefore you will give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. That's where Micah is from. Moresheth Gath means betrothed, give away in marriage. So parting gift, he's playing on the idea of a father giving his daughter gifts when he gives her away in marriage. That's what the play here on words is. And that's also where Micah is from, by the way. He's from Moresheth Gath. You will give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. The town of Akzib will prove deceptive to the kings of Israel. And Akzib means deception. I will bring a conqueror against you who live in Mareshah. And Mareshah sounds like the Hebrew for conquer. He who is the glory of Israel will come to Adullam. Now that actually refers to something that David has done before. David took up refuge in Adullam as he was fleeing from Saul. And so we started with a reference to David, and we're going to end with a reference to David. In 1 Samuel 22, verse 1, David left Gath, and he tried to take refuge in Gath temporarily, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And he's there again in 23, verse 13. Second Samuel, excuse me. I got confused. When he escapes from his son Absalom, much later in his reign, wait, I'm totally confused. Anyway, he escaped. I got disoriented there. Sorry about that. But the reference to Adullam is a reference to the king escaping to Adullam, because David did that a couple of times in his life. So we started with a reference to Tell It Not in Gath, which was a reference to David's lament. That was back in verse 10, and we're ending kind of with a reference to David again about fleeing to the caves of Adullam. So the glory of Israel, which I guess refers to the king. He's referring to like this. He's calling back to David's escaping. Will come to Adullam. Shave your heads in mourning. For the children, shave your heads in mourning for the children in whom you delight. Make yourselves as bald as the vulture, for they, your children, will go from you into exile. So you have all kinds of problems. And Samaria is gone. Samaria will be destroyed, and the same sin that caused Samaria to fall that is here in Judah, and it's going to cause Judah to fall. And all these places, all these towns are going to suffer the same fate Samaria has suffered. So weep and mourn for your loss. Here, personified as their children being taken from them. Again, we saw that happen with the Israelites fighting the Judahites in the days of Ahaz. They killed the men in battle and took their women and children captive. Now they had to send them back. This was totally common in warfare at the time. If you died in battle, chances were very good your wife and kids were going to be taken away bound and naked as captives of your enemies. You didn't want that. That was what you were trying to keep from happening.